Are you ready for this? The great Varley sized me up as he cupped a small plastic ball in his hand. I rolled my left shoulder and got into a stance. As I'll ever be. He smirked, and that was the last I saw of his face. My eyes became glued to the ball, almost as if in slow motion it floated through the air. From this point, only one thing mattered: winning. Varley's paddle rolled over the ball and thrust it forward. Topspin, I thought, as I instinctively took a step backward. The ball cascaded across the table, narrowly missing the net and accelerating with each contact. My hand was already in motion. My paddle dampened the blow, and I flicked my wrist sideways. See how you like this, I thought to myself, as I imbued a side spin to my return. The ball curved left, and it managed to bounce upon the white line at the table's left side. That topspin he put on the ball is no joke. I prepared for Varley's counterattack, going to have to be careful. A chill shot my spine. Oh no. A sense of dread came over me as I realized what I had done. Varley's body was taut, his arm pulled back like a spring ready to snap forward. Not bad, he remarked, sounding generally impressed. His right arm exploded forward and slammed to the ball. I couldn't even get my paddle in front of it. The ball catapulted forward with tremendous power and connected with my side of the table, and then flew all the way to the far corner of the room. Varley lowered his arm and sneered at me, his voice dripping with contempt. But not good enough. The table tennis ball, still spinning from the hit, kicked up a little cloud of dust as it continued to drive itself along the ground, almost as if it didn't realize the point was won and it could give up spinning now. I looked back at my opponent, all 6'5" of him. This is going to be rough, I realized. I bit my lower lip. 14 games. 14 games of slam after slam after slam. It was all I could do to even return his powerful hits, let alone get my own attacks in. I looked at the scoreboard behind me. 12-2 in Varley's favor. Sweat dripped from my brow. I took a deep breath and served. My ball came back to me like a traitor and connected with my side just before curving out of my reach. It clattered to the ground, the sound of its bouncing on the concrete floor echoing off the walls. Well, Varley tucked his right arm behind his head and gave his biceps a stretch. Looks like that's another point for me. He meandered over to the ball. Oh, over to the board. Ah, I see. He meandered over the board and put another tally beneath his name. He wasn't even trying anymore. At the start, he had brought his A game, but at this point he was relaxed. He knew he didn't have to play all out to beat me. Don't feel bad, he consoled. Me and my buddies at uni play every day in between classes. He flipped his paddle up in the air and let it land back in his palm. And besides, you got a few games on me. Most people can't even do that, so I would say you're not half bad. With a little more, hey. I cut him off, my eyes fixed to the ground. How much time do we have before you leave? Varley glanced over his shoulder at the clock. I don't know, 30 minutes or so? He broke into a revealing smile. What, have you had enough? My eyes didn't leave the ground. And we started at 5, is that right? Varley shrugged. Something like that. So if we leave at 6, then I guess we'd be halfway? Why do you ask? I lifted my chin, and my eyes pierced into his. An uncontrollable, sadistic grin escaped onto my face. There was no containing it now. Oh, my tone eased with ego. I thought it was time I started trying, that's all. For a second, fear flashed across Varley's expression, but just as quickly as it had come, it had gone. What, you think getting cocky's gonna help? He chuckled. Being a tryhard isn't all it takes to win, you know. He grabbed the ball off the floor and brought it back to the table. But hey, maybe the fighting spirit of yours will make a difference. Only one way to find out. He served the ball, and it skirted atop the tabletop. For a millisecond, my gaze met Varley's, and with my eyes I whispered a single word. Mistake. My paddle slammed to the ball, and the blur connected with Varley's side of the table. He blinked twice. He couldn't even react. After a few moments of stupor, he shook himself free and muttered something about a lucky hit. He tried to grab the ball, but it evaded his grasp due to the topspin still writhing within it. After a few more attempts, he managed to grab it, and he returned to his side of the table. All right, fine, I'll give you that one. But how do you like this? And with the final word, his paddle shot the ball across the table. It was almost twice as fast as his last serve. I didn't even hesitate. My arm swung forward as if it had a mind of its own and hurled the ball with ungodly speed and accuracy into the far right corner of his side of the table. Varley tried to reach it, but he wasn't even close. I threw up my hands. Oh man! My words dripped with sarcasm. I guess you're right. I really do need to improve. I intend to hit the ball a centimeter to the left. I let my words hang in the air as an uncontrollable grin remained painted across my face. Sure you did, William retorted with a puff. All right, let's see what happens when you serve. I rolled my right shoulder. Why not? I tossed the ball in the air, and, as it fell, I raced my paddle alongside it, commanding it to do my bidding. The ball bounced high into the air, and Varley capitalized on what was an all-too-perfect setup for a point-taking slam. But his paddle didn't connect. The ball, as if directed by an unseen hand, curved just beyond Varley's reach. It was too late now. The table tennis ball gently kissed the tabletop before bouncing away. I donned an exaggerated expression of concern. Is there a hole in your paddle? I asked, sounding almost sincere. Ugh! Varley growled. Try that again! My appearance regained its conceited composure, and I sneered back. It would be my pleasure. I gave Varley the exact same serve, and once again his paddle hit nothing but air. He stared daggers at me. How are you doing this? He growled. What, me? I feigned ignorance. I'm just trying now, that's all. Fine, Varley huffed as he got into a stance for his serve. But I'm ready now, so don't think your tricks are going to work like they did before. With a fire in his eyes, he fired up his signature topspin attack and stepped back, ready for the blast of power that would inevitably follow. But it never came. My paddle sliced through the air like a hot knife through butter, and it found its way beneath the ball to cradle it, almost like an egg amongst a bed of feathers. Then, with a delicate push and a backward flick of the wrist, the ball floated over the net. Varley sprang forward, desperate to keep the play alive, even if it was just barely. The ball hit the side of the table and leapt backwards, away from Varley's advance, throwing itself into the net, as if trying with all its might to escape the beast before it and come back to the one that handled it so gently. Varley fumed, a frenzy ignited in his eyes. This is not happening! He screamed, as he snatched at the ball and served once more. The ball sped across the table, and by the time I was done with it, the turbo had been turned on. It connected with Varley's side of the table. Ah! Varley let out a war cry and recklessly attempted to slam despite the inopportune positioning of the ball. Yet by some miracle, it worked. The ball, hardly a blur, had cleared the net and collided with my side of the table. Yes! Varley screamed. Take that! His triumph turned to despair as he saw the ball clatter back across his side of the table. His eyes found mine, and, as if wounded, he seemed to say, How could anyone return that? My steel-cold, arrogant glare exhibited not a shred of sympathy. I walked over and grabbed the ball. So the score is 6-0, right? As the evening wore on, Varley's demeanor mutated from rage to hysteria. At the start, he simply tried harder, and while his play did improve, it wasn't near enough to beat me. Thus, with each tally added to my side of the scoreboard, he grew more and more desperate. His playstyle became reckless, and once that only further entrenched him in his losses, his play became drenched in hopeless hysteria. Like before, he ceased to even try, but this time because he realized by doing so he would only embarrass himself further. His arrogance melted into shame, as game after game he lost to an opponent he once thought inferior. And me? I loved it all. I drank up his despair until I intoxicated myself, a perfect cocktail brewed by my own hand. And as the clock struck 6, the final score was 13-23 in my favor. There you have it, the tale of William and my table tennis game, with some significant dramatization. And I feel like a disclaimer should be given about what actually happened, though, just so you don't feel like I'm a jerk. See, what actually occurred is William and I played like the first 14 games or so with me using my left hand, and he didn't know that though. And though I did all right, he was clearly better than me. So then going into it, I wasn't sure if I was actually gonna switch my right hand at all because I don't know, it's fun to have another new trump card and play, it's fun to play with your left hand because it was still a good game. It wasn't a bad game. But then around game 14, William got super cocky. He started just basically, I don't know, going easy. He stopped treating me like a serious opponent, and he started just talking smack. It was totally patronizing. And so at that point, the gloves were off, right? I was like, okay, here we go. So what followed was absolutely hilarious. There were 5 stages of table tennis grief for William, and I got to watch him go through, each stage. It was beautiful. See, there was the disbelief, right? He was like, what? No way. Then he was confused. Then he got just super mad, and William mad is really funny. Then there was hysteria, where he was like, I can't believe it. And then acceptance. Honestly, unlike how I portrayed myself, when we actually played the game, I just couldn't stop laughing the entire time. Watching William go through these stages of emotion as the game progressed was probably one of the funniest things I've seen. Especially the anger phase. He was genuinely furious he couldn't beat me, even though he was putting everything into it, and it was honestly so funny to watch. Saving my right hand till the end was by far one of the most fulfilling decisions I've ever made. So, yeah, absolute comedy gold. Of course, I'm not sure William thought so. He actually mandatorily postponed our final goodbye just because he was so vexed. He's like, I can't wish you off well right now. If you left, I'd just be happy. But, from my point of view, it was totally worth it. Also, I think the whole experience may have taught him not to be arrogant, just because he thinks he's better than someone. So yeah, character building moment, I'm not sure he did good things for me, because it made me very happy and potentially a bit more prideful. But, aside from that. Anyway, aside from comedy, I got to the best part was having the almost anime-like overcoming scene. Because you see in almost every anime that's a sport anime or anything like that, you have your team that's losing pretty drastically, and then like get serious, or like they have like an inspiring speech, and then they come back spectacularly and just obliterate the enemy, right? Like it's as if like they have an inner like skill set that just gets unlocked when the speech is given. And of course, I've never had that moment before because that's not how life works. Just trying harder does not make you win, in fact. But having 2 levels of skill and saving the higher level for last is pretty close to the same feeling as like having this overcoming anime-like experience. And I will tell you, it actually felt so cool. Like it feels so much better to go from being the underdog to the champion than just being the champion all along. So I think in the future I might try to set myself up for more moments like that because it was just very enjoyable. But yeah, anyway, that's how the actual table tennis match went, and it's become one of my more cherished memories. After finishing the ride of my last Life of email at the Varley's computer, I then left for dinner at the first house and journeyed on to my next abode. Once I got to the first, I played some table tennis with Michael and Taylor, and then we had dinner, which was nice. But, all I ate was dried fruit. Oh, dried apricots and canned fruit before, so at my standard of nice is low. But I'm sure it was nice. Then we tried playing some Minecraft, but that went exceptionally poorly, as the first children do not make good Minecraft buddies. Like, Michael and Rissy are at each other's throats, and Taylor just does his own thing, so it's more like vengeful chaos than cooperative gameplay. Sorry, I blew my nose thinking more. You don't want to, like, do that in the middle of narration, even though I need to, so I have to wait until now. And I mean, like, vengeful chaos is not always bad, but, like, for instance, when Brawl Boys turned into Mind Men, it was kind of like that. Except the difference is that, even though we were competing with each other, it was still a good spirited competition, and we'd have, like, trading opportunities and stuff. So, it can be good, but with this game, it was definitely not, like, the very trade-permitting kind. And perhaps it was also due to the fact that we started a new world, we hadn't established stuff yet, and the screens were also really small, etc. Whatever the reason, not the vibe I was hoping for with Minecraft, so after that ended, I was, like, not really eager to get back into it. After Minecraft came to a close, Mr. Firth came with me to the Ark, and gave me a brief tour of the place before showing me my room, and that was that. The Ark is a lot like Create and Rain in the way it's laid out. A few communal abilities, which are cobbled together, and then dorm rooms with bunk beds. However, even though the place was a little bit jank, it felt, pretty comfortable to me. Maybe because it reminded me of Cape and Rain so much, actually. And yeah, I got situated and basically just went to bed. The next day was not full of peaceful sleeping in them, because previously Elkin had informed me of another, albeit much shorter, road trip for a similar purpose to the one previously engaged in, and I agreed, although hesitantly. And a large part of that hesitancy was due to the fact that when I had to get up at, 6:45 a.m., that was not fun. So I did do that, though, and I proceeded to drive all the way down to Hamilton to meet up with him, which was like 40-minute drive from the Ark, so that definitely sucked, mostly because gas is so expensive in New Zealand. Like, it meant I paid roughly 40 New Zealand dollars to get to Elkin's place and back, which really makes you consider driving places. It's like, well, I could go to the beach, but that's $100. And you're like, do I really want to spend $100 to go to the beach? Honestly, I don't think it was worth it, though, like, driving with Elkin. Because we drove around for, like, 3 hours in total to pick up this lemon of a car. And that was the event. Which is fine. Like, I don't really care about what the occurrence was. But the main thing was Elkin and I had already talked about all this stuff. Like, the life stuff in our previous extremely massive long drive. And so all that was left was philosophical stuff. Which, don't get me wrong, I love talking about. But unfortunately, Elkin could remember none of it. Like, he couldn't remember anything I told him. It's like the whole way there, and about half the way back, I went over like various ethical systems, problems of evil, like arguments for godly distance, and I was like, all right, we have half an hour left, an hour left. Let's go over what we talked about so you can remember better. And he remembered none of it. I mean, okay, I'm sure he remembered some of it. There was a large gap between everything I said and everything he recalled. So for the last like half an hour of the drive, I was like trying to help him remember, but to no avail. And so that's why I don't think it was very worthwhile, because I mean, like, I'm pretty sure Elkin doesn't recall what I told him. However, after I did got to talk to Elkin's sisters actually, and mom, which was, worth it. And made the whole trip like a worthwhile adventure. Because, see, prior to getting a chance to talk with them, Michael had informed me that Elkin's youngest sister, Emmanuel, had this unique tendency, which I found very intriguing, and piqued my curiosity. Unfortunately, the practice that was unique cannot be disclosed, because apparently Michael wasn't even supposed to know about it in the first place. But, regardless, it hinted at the fact that Emmanuel had a very rich inner life. And as you know, people with robust inner lives do intrigue me. Hence, I was excited because when I actually got to talk with her, I was like, ooh, is she going to have like a deep, like, inner life? And it turned out that was kind of like a no, but she has a good capacity for a deep inner life. So, maybe in like 4 years or something, she might be more interesting. Not that she was uninteresting. I was going to clarify that. Anyway, I mean, that's expected though. Like, she's only 16, so, not like that's unlikely. It's normal. So yeah, regardless, my curiosity was satiated. I got to talk to Emmanuel and Gabrielle, and then Elkin's mom about a lot of different philosophical issues, which I deeply enjoyed, and that was a really good time. Dominic, Elkin's other sister, she's in the middle, acted pretty strangely for the whole time I was there, and she really wanted to know my food preferences for some strange reason. She was very intrigued by my food preferences. So I don't know exactly why she acted strangely. I have my suspicions, but I'm not confident enough in my intuitions to give a confident conclusion. Therefore, I'm going to let that remain a mystery. Regardless, she did convince me to get a Burger Fuel burger, so I won't say the whole food conversation was without any merit. Though, to be honest, it was, like, not that good. I mean, okay. Like, it was good if I was trying to be healthy, but I would take a Five Guys burger over a Burger Food burger any day, like, as far as taste goes. And I mean, who eats a burger to be healthy? Like, it's kind of like counterintuitive to the nature of burgers. In the essence of burger, there is anti-health, and then, if you derive it of its essential properties, it's no longer the same thing, etc. So, yeah, they kindly made me dinner, which was nice, and I talked their ears off for ages. I then said my goodbyes and head over to the first for some table tennis with Taylor, and that was decent. Taylor and I had some 5 out of 10 quality conversations while hitting the ball back and forth, and then I went back to the Ark, watched some anime, and went to sleep. The next day was real slow. As of the start, I slept in for ages, since I didn't get, much sleep the night before. And I must say, like, the whole time I stayed at the Ark, and even most of the time I stayed in, like, Glenn's and Mag Place, I averaged around 10 to 12 hours of sleep, which is a ton of sleep. Like, don't underestimate how much good sleep, can do. And I had slept so much in my second half of New Zealand. Sorry. See, Joe, I'm not going to complain about Joe's lack of editing. Thank you, Joe, for when you did edit for me. See, look at that. It's better to be grateful than a complaining person. Anyway. Honestly, though, like, sleeping feels really nice. I'm not sure what it is, but it just makes, like, the rest of the day super chill. So, yeah, I just like to sleep 12 hours the rest of my life. Just every night, Is that too much to ask? I feel like that's a really reasonable question. Really reasonable demand. Anyway, I slept in for ages, had breakfast, and then William came over and we had that epic table tennis showdown aforementioned. I watched some science YouTube video stuff before Taylor came over and we played some table tennis until it was time for bed. He also brought over Bundabergs, which were like bitters. I think it's called lime and bitters flavors, which was not very good. I thought that was Ben's favorite, but it was apparently Caleb's favorite, not Ben's favorite. And Caleb, you have a weird taste, man. Like, that was kind of gross, honestly. I didn't even, like, enjoy that flavor. Anyway, we also got some other snacks, a lot of Tim Tams and milk, and brought over a speaker for some music, and we just vibed while hitting the ball back and forth. And, I think table tennis really is a very good game. Like, it can be as chill or as intense as you want it to be. And it's also, like, a great thing to do while talking. Like, I bet if you had all political, like, debates take place over table tennis games, then the world would just be a better place. Once Taylor headed back, I then chilled in... I'm doing my live stream recordings. Okay. I then chilled in the top bunk seat I made with pillows, because you could, like, stack a bunch of pillows in the top right corner of the room in the top bunk, so this thing's in your head, which I don't know why that makes a difference, but it makes you, like, enjoy the place more. And I just, like, watched anime until I went to bed. The funny thing I noticed about myself, though, while at the Ark, and thinking back, I've always been like this, is I really like having that little space in the top corner of the top bunk. The two-wall corner, where the walls intersect. Like, you can utilize a few pillows to give you some back support, and then it's just really nice. Like, something about having the roof really near your head just is inviting to me. Don't ask me why. The next day I worked on my philosophy memorization. I finished the section I set out to memorize, and then I recorded my last live email, which took absolutely ages because it was so long, and this is also going to take a while. Also, this time I'm recording up in my room instead of down in my basement because my dungeon is still flooded. Not like standing water, but everything's muddy and smells weird. So I'm here, which is why Dad come in and etc. Anyway, yep. I then started reading a book largely against my will, which was kind of a funny situation. See, previously, while I was waiting for William to arrive, I decided to look at the Ark's massive collection of books which covered the walls, right, with the intent to pull something out to read, because my computer wasn't fixed still. It still isn't fixed, and I had, like, no way to work on my papers, so there weren't, like, many options for me, so I was like, well, I might as well read a book. Hence, I ended up spending, like, 30 minutes looking through the shelves and pulled out, like, 5 books I might be interested in reading. But, it wasn't like I was, like, I'd like to read this. It's like, well, if I get really bored, I guess I'll read this. Thus, I had come back to that bookshelf perusing. However, once I got down there, I ran into this guy named Justin, who I learned after the fact is actually the guy who let me stay at the Ark, so retroactively, thank you, Justin, even though he'll never read that. Anyway, so Justin starts talking with me, and, like, I'm not opposed to the conversation to start off with, but it gets increasingly awkward and punctuated with these, like, periods of 10-second silence. And I'm not sure if Justin realized it was awkward or not, but after each of those silences, he would just continue the conversation and push it down another line of ultimately meaningless inquiry. And our conversation went something like this. Justin, I see. Oh, I can't do an Asian accent. I see. I see. This is just. I'm sorry for all you Asian people. I can't do an Asian accent at all. I'm just gonna not go for that because that's just pitiful. I see. So what are you trying to do? Oh no, what do you do? Me. Oh, I'm studying to be a mechanical engineer. It's pretty rough though, like definitely more of a challenge than I thought it would be. I'm just gonna literally narrate the awkward silence by being awkwardly silent. Okay. Justin. So, what do you find challenging about it? Me. I mean, a few things. First off, electrical engineering is rough. First time I've ever filled a class in my life. And besides that, it's also just a really big time commitment, a lot of work. Not to mention the higher maths like Diffie Q are just a pain. Justin. Mm. Me. So, what are you up to right now? Justin. Just doing a bit of maintenance around the place. Me. Oh, well, I don't want to keep you. I'm just coming down here to look at the books, that's all. Justin. No, it's no trouble. How long are you here for? Me. About 2 more weeks. They'll only be here at the Ark for like a week or so. Actually, it would be 3 more weeks. Anyway, thanks so much for letting me stay, by the way. It's a really nice place. Justin. Yeah, it's not that bad. Justin. So, how are your parents doing? And so the conversation just went on like that for like 5 minutes. I gave him a ton of conversational outs, but like he did not pick on the verbal cues. Like he was he did not pick up that I was like, I would like to stop talking now, please. Hence, after ages of awkward back and forth, I realized I needed to utilize a more forceful method of escape. Thus, I brought the conversation around to books, and then I asked if he knew what would happen to the books I'd set aside, because I had a bunch of books that I'd pulled aside and they were gone from the table. And then Justin showed me where he put them on the shelf, and then, spotting the red cover of 1984, I grabbed it and effectively said, "Oh, look, just what I came here for. Thanks for showing me where it was. Now I'm gonna go back, to my dorm and read this book. Thanks for the talk." And I just exited the conversation fairly forcefully. I mean, it was more subtle and nuanced than that. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, I finally managed to extract myself from the conversation, and I made it safely back to my room. However, once there, I couldn't just not read 1984 because I just said I was going to do so. Thus, I started reading the book, and partially against my will. The whole experience, and by whole experience I mean conversation with Justin, did make me realize though how much I take subtle social cues for granted. Like, I can drop certain sentences that mean I want to leave while saying something entirely different. And then my conversation picks up on those subtle cues and in response finds a way to end the conversation, which is actually astounding. Like what I said was, I don't want to keep you from your work, but what I meant was, stop talking to me now. And I just expect that everyone recognizes the second meaning is what I actually intend and will consequently act in accordance. But the fact that Justin thought I meant what I said, proceeded to point out to me, and okay. But the fact is, Justin thought I meant what I said, and he proceeded to point out to me he didn't feel inconvenienced, and he thought he addressed the issue, and that just made me realize how far I've come socially. Because for ages I was just like Justin, unaware of the subtle social game being played and all the double meanings behind words. Yet, being now powered up by Alex 2.0, it's like all has become clear. Oh, I might need to pause. Ben and Bob's Gables are going to be allowed. Alright, unpause. Where was I? Let's see. Oh yeah, being powered up by Alex 2.0, it's like everything becomes clear. It's actually absurd how much I've learned and adopted the rules everyone plays by. Not like I only understand them, but I'm actually kind of good at them. One big thing I noticed coming back to New Zealand and being outside my typical social circles is that I am inconceivably better in social situations than I was before. Not only do I understand the rules in ways others understand them, but I become proficient at playing by them. It turns out that I'm actually really good at the social game now, and the shift is palpable for me. It honestly makes so much things make sense. The reason I hated small talk before, or at least one of the reasons, was because I didn't understand the rules of the game. And I'm even when I did understand, I wasn't proficient at the play. And yet deep talk, as you might call it, operates by entirely different rules. And through dedicated effort, of course, I become good at playing that kind of social game. And thus I always wanted to move the conversations to the area I know how to play well within. But now that I'm well practiced in the small talk area, perhaps even an expert, I've oddly enough found it as enjoyable as deep talk. It's a whole different ball game, but now that I'm quite good at it, it's actually quite a fun one to play. Of course, it does depend, right? If it's just a sports small talk, then of course I'm not apt because I have no knowledge. But, anyway, that's a nuance that should be inserted. Still, I'm not quite at the point where it's natural. I've got to enter a sort of mode, and, if I'm broken from my flow state, I have to try and remind myself of how the game is played and get back into it and stuff. But nevertheless, the difference in my skill set in this area is literally night and day, so it's been really cool to see. The second thing that my encounter with Justin brings to mind is just how odd it is we play the social game the way we do. I don't mind it so much now that I'm good at it. And in fact, I think proficiency reduces the striking nature of the oddity. But the fact that we say things that have no connection with our intended meaning is honestly quite odd behavior. Like, why not just say, I would like this conversation to end, please? Like, instead of going about in this roundabout, can you guess what I really mean sort of way. And of course, the proposal I've made sounds, incalculably rude. Like, if I just said, I'd like this conversation to end, like, when I was just talking with someone, they'd be like, wow, that was super rude. But, like, it's not as if, let me see where I was, sorry. Oh, but it's not as if saying, well, I don't want to keep you from your work should be any less rude. Like, anyone who's trained in social language can tell you, I don't want to keep you really means, I would like to stop talking. It's not like I've tricked them, my conversational partner, or I've deceived them in any, like, way whatsoever. When I say I would want to keep you from your work, it just means I would like this conversation to end. The meaning in the first sense is just as clear to him. But for some reason, like, we've contrived this convoluted game where you must, present your request by using words that don't mean what you say. And if you, don't do so, you're called rude, which basically just means you suck at this game. But the game, as far as I can tell, has no objective merit. It's like currency, only valuable because everyone uses it and considers it such. Actually, I just had a revelation. I don't think that's actually exactly true. As I think about it, there's a unique, utility to the social game. So the social game is kind of like gambling, where each person comes to the table with their own sum of social value, or then proceeds to engage it by the social rules of the game in various bets and bargains and attempt to walk away with more of this social value and the amount they came in with. Then the amount they came in with. At least that's often the goal, but the social value is also like currency because it can be utilized to manipulate others to your will. So it has like, objective good making features. And that's what social gravity really is. Hence, of course, everyone gambles for more of it because the more you have, the more you can control others around you. And of course, that can be cashed in for innumerable tangible goods. So like you can, get Mario Kart games, or you can have help with moving, or something like that, right? I see how it all works now. See, that's why people love to play the social game, and that's why those who are bad at it, don't like to play. Because the people who win walk away with power, and the people who lose walk away their slaves. And that's, of course, to exaggerate some, but I think that's accurate nonetheless. Kind of a dark interpretation of social interactions, not gonna lie. But, I'm sure there's more to the game, but nevertheless, it seems like that's at least partially accurate. Anyway, all that aside, I managed to get out of the conversation with Justin, and because of cognitive dissonance, began reading 1984. And after a while of reading, I watched a bit of anime, I read some more of the book, and then I had dinner with the first while we tried to play Starvio. However, neither of the first boys liked it very much, and so we switched over to Daipyo, which they enjoyed a lot more. I ended up with the biggest score of 65,000, by the way. Once I got back to my room at the Ark, I just read more of 1984 and watched a bit of anime. The next morning I woke up and watched some anime, but mostly I just read 1984 for ages. Like, yeah, that's like all I did. I then once again went over the first for dinner, and after that I brought Michael back with me at the Ark for some table tennis. And he actually did way better than I thought he would, like almost matching the natural play level of my right hand. However, he has some like notable weaknesses, so I started exploiting those, and then I won every game. Which is cool that I can be controlled enough to know. First of all, I can figure out what Michael's weaknesses are, table tennis wise, and then exploit them consistently. And he was like, "What the heck is happening?" Kind of like a Williams scenario. Was pretty funny. Also, oddly enough, though, when I started playing with my left hand in the natural playstyle, I also almost won every game. So for some reason, even though my left hand is objectively worse, my defensive playstyle I play with my left hand is like Michael's kryptonite. Like, it was weird. Still, I think we both had a good time, and we got a lot of games in, so that was fun. Also, Michael got to witness the creeper prayer chants of the Asian guy who was praying in the room next to us. I was telling Mr. Firth about them because they sound like the rite of some ancient religion, but I guess wherever he's from, that's just how they pray. And it was like I just repeating for literally ages. Like, that chanting went on for 2.5 hours straight, and he wasn't even done by the time we left. Like, he should just stop being Protestant and go be like a Byzantine monk or something. I think he'd find it more fulfilling. Like, serious dedication, man. Once I returned Michael to his dwelling place, I then read 1984 until I finally finished it at midnight. And honestly, that book was very good. It really got me thinking about, things. And so I started writing down those thoughts, and I continued to do so until 2 in the morning. And if anyone's interested in those meta thoughts, they can just let me know. The next day I had breakfast, and then I caught up with Esther, after about a year and a half, by the way. Ever since Morgan and I went to see her in Idaho, ages ago, we haven't talked at all. So it's, been really weird, and I was quite anxious to figure out, why was that? So yeah, finally got around to just catching up, and that was very good. And I'm glad we're back in touch, because I was able to discover the reason why we had fallen out of touch. After that, I wrote down more philosophical meta thoughts for 2 hours until my brain gave up, and then I watched some more anime to rejuvenate it, because, anime is like a healing balm. It cleanses your mind from profitable activity. It's like, you think hard? Don't worry. Anime will, like, lull your mind into a restful sleep where nothing actually happens in there. Anyway, from there I drove to Kalamutu to have dinner with Mr. Height, and that was kind of hectic because he has 5 hyper girls and 1 hyper little boy, and that boy is also the youngest, so I can say I did feel a bit sorry for him with 5 older sisters. Like, you're gonna have a rough life, kid, but push through. I believe in you. So yeah, Mr. Height and I caught up on life. We talked a little theology and philosophy, and overall that was good. Once I got back, I did even more philosophical writing, and then I watched anime until I went to sleep. The next day began with ramen and me writing down some more meta thoughts. I then watched some anime and went and got groceries and gas in Cambridge, and then I switched back and forth between working on my paper and watching anime. Though the majority of the time, I will admit, was spent watching anime. So, yeah. The next day, however, was chill, just the day before, and I also did working on my paper and watching anime. But this time, the majority of the work was spent on my paper, so it evens out overall. I would say I worked on my paper for around 5 to 6 hours, something like that. However, I also spent some time updating my death note that will go out to key figures in my social circles 2 years after I die, should Gmail still exist then. So there you go, you can look forward to that. If I perish, if you wait 2 years, you'll get a note from me, and it's very heartfelt. That counts as my last words, by the way. Whatever I say before I actually die, doesn't count as my last words. So if I say something like, my chest hurts, then you can't count those, you have to count my death note as my last words. Just making that clear in case there's ever a dispute later on. Anyway, that's right. I have a contingency plan to send out in case my Gmail account ever has been inactive for 2 or more years. And, though ironically I haven't written a will yet, I've prepared nevertheless for my death, if it occurs. And, I don't really think I'd have much to say in a will, so that works out anyway. But yeah, that's something I'd had done 2 years ago. I written an old message that was pretty outdated, and I also had to update and change my contacts because who I'm close to has changed in that time. And yeah, I just was like, well, I might as well do that. Because, you never know, what's going to happen in life. And I don't want my legacy to just perish. I don't want to just have, people have, 2 days of fond memories where, oh, I'm sad Alex died, and then they just move on. I want to have, a revival moment where it's ha! You thought I was dead and gone? Ha! Revenge from the grave! And then, 2 years later, once you've already, done all the mini grieving, if, of course, I was grieved, then, I come back and, I don't know. I would say avenge myself, but there's nothing to avenge. So, it'd just be more remind you of my existence. And more. But the more that's only, you only can discover the more if if I die. So I'm afraid the more is forever secret. Anyway, I have no intention of dying, by the way. That's also, I need to make that very clear. I just make this thing because I like having contingency plans in place. I just feel like that should be explicitly claimed. Other than that, I updated that bad boy, and that was how the day went. The next day I only got 4 hours of sleep because I stayed up for ages thinking. I had so many meta thoughts. I then woke up fairly early to drive to Bo's house, and from there we drove to Auckland, where we could meet up with Bo's friends, and from there we drove to paintball. The drive to Auckland was pretty great. We listened to a bunch of music, and I got to sing, and that was great. And then we met Bo's friends, and that was okay. They were decent. And then we drove to paintball, and that was the worst. Mega lame. Now, granted, I only have had 1 other paintball experience to go off of, but by comparison, that place that we went to sucked, just like the recent one. First off, the paintball guns were way weak. It hardly hurt to get shot. Second, you couldn't shoot anywhere near straight, so the only method of hitting anyone was spray and pray. But they charge you, precisely, 13.4 cents per paintball. So, to shoot 7 shots is to spend $1, effectively. And so it makes spray and pray a very costly method of, attacking. Which, of course, is their intention, because they want to make bank. But worst of all, the arenas are horribly built, and horribly thought through, such that most of the time, responding was legal, right? So it didn't even, matter if you shot someone. But then, even when it wasn't legal, it wasn't enforced. So shooting your opponents did nothing the entire game. Because for most of the game, they could just respawn. And then the second part of the game, when they couldn't respawn, they just respawned anyway. So no one would ever even acknowledge they'd been hit most of the time. So yeah, overall it was just a mega lame experience. And I didn't really enjoy it. But at least I didn't get any welts. So, in that regard, it's a plus. After the paintball, most people disbanded, but Bo had 2 friends that took us out for dinner. Although, took us out is a strong word. We paid for our own dinner, but, they went with us to dinner. And at that point, I wasn't feeling very good. I sat down with Bo, and I, was like, my nose is running a lot. And yeah, that was a bit of... I did get sick after that, by the way. But anyway, we made it back home. I was still feeling kind of bad, but I agreed prior to watch the new Guardians of the Galaxy with Bo, and honestly, that was a horrible decision because it was a 3-hour movie, so first of all, that sucked. Second of all, I felt horrible the whole time. And 3, it was just a garbage movie in my opinion. I did not like it. I was not even hardly entertained. Not to speak of the quality of the show itself. I just wasn't even entertained. It was just bad. And I will just once again restate that anime is just objectively better than the kind of movies that are being produced today. Like, the movies being produced today just suck. And after that, I finally drove home and sickly crawled into bed to sleep. The next morning, I felt garbage. All that had proceeded to be done with great lethargy in the following order. I watched anime for an hour. I worked on my big paper for 2 hours. I then did nothing for 2 or 3 hours because I was just so tired, which is a very odd state of being. You're just like, you're literally staring at a wall for 2 to 3 hours. You're just like, I don't have the will to like do anything. Like, even anime is more tedious than just to sit here. And then I slept for 3 hours or so because I was very tired. And then I woke from my fitful slumber, watched anime for 2.5 hours until I was once again tired, and then went back to sleep and slept for ages. The next day, I cleaned my room very slowly due to my sick condition. It was actually supposed to be cleaned, and I was supposed to be out the day before, but I just wasn't feeling up to the day before, so I asked David if it would be alright if I, stayed one more day. And he was like, yeah, that was okay. But since I had now expended my extra day, I felt the pressure to move, and so I was like, alright, I'll give the people of the Ark their room back. And over the course of the next 2 hours or so, I eventually got done what I would normally got done in about half an hour. And I did succeed, but it was just painful. From there, I went over to Glenn and Mag's house, where I was greeted with a very nice place to stay. And honestly, having my own little place, especially a kitchen, was like a slice of heaven at that point in my journey. I was thus, because I had a kitchen, inspired to cook, and I went out and bought 250 New Zealand dollars worth of groceries and cooking utensils in hope of pursuing my culinary dreams. However, I will say at this point that I'm fairly confident my culinary dreams will forever go unrealized. Because cooking is harder than I thought it would be. I'm kind of bad at cooking. Like, I mean, it's science, but like, I'm mostly bad at putting in effort for such temporary gains. Like, why is it worthwhile to spend an hour to an hour and a half trying to make something that you enjoy, but like isn't worth an hour and a half? Like, meat tastes good, right? Meat is good. You can just put like some salt on it, and it's good meat. Or you could make it like better meat, which is like ooh, instead of just like But like, is the ooh as opposed to the like really worth an hour and a half of your time? I'm becoming dubious. Anyway, once I got back to the house, I cooked 8 pieces of bacon and then mixed the bacon grease with chicken broth, which I then boiled down to make essence of meat juice. And I put all that on rice. And see, I have no idea if it was good, if it was any good. Like, all I could taste was a hint of meat, which, given how much essence of meat I put on rice, I'm quite confident that the true flavor was much more than just a hint. But hey, whatever. I made myself a hearty meal, and that's what matters. From there, I watched some anime. I wrote this intro, The Life of Nemo, and then I got a bit of more anime in before going to sleep. The next morning, I felt better, but not good. I didn't feel as sick as the day before, but I still felt like super sad for energy and kind of just like trudged around everywhere. Also, I've officially developed a new way for testing how sick you are, and this is a test performed by squirting a bunch of lemon juice on your tongue. The less you taste, the sicker you are. And so, while at the start of the day, I could hardly taste anything. By the end, I could taste about 20% the normal, tang. Thus, at the start of the day, we could say I was 95% sick, and at the end of the day, I was 80% sick. And, this is how useful the test is. Like, it tells you how you can rigorously quantify your sickness. So if I remember, like, how sick are you, you could be like, dump a bunch of lemon juice on your tongue and be like, 16.5% sick. And then, we'll have a precise metric to know. I know. I deserve all your praise and adoration for developing this wholly scientific and rigorous method. As for how I spent the whole day, well, I basically just watched anime. I worked on my paper some, though, and I did some very short walks in between. But I will admit, the ratio of anime to paper definitely fell in anime's favor because I was feeling sick, so the productivity was low. I also decided I was trying cooking myself some breaded bacon, and that was a flop, like literally and figuratively, because the bacon was floppy, and also because it just wasn't good. I couldn't really taste it, but the texture was definitely much worse than normal bacon. The next morning, I felt significantly better, and by the end of the day, I basically felt normal, so that was great. That whole day as well, I watched anime and worked on my paper. However, I also did cook myself some chicken, and that was cool, because I started to taste the chicken, which was nice. However, at this point in time, it was my 4th day of not, doing anything social or seeing anyone, so I began to notice some, concerning behavior. As it turns out, when I don't get sufficient social interaction, I may or may not start talking to myself in weird voices. Just vocalizing my thought process in unpredictable ways. And more often than I would care to admit, also in song. So the degree to which I sympathize with musicals has now grown astronomically. Everyone in musicals is effectively just socially deprived. Like, they just haven't seen people in weeks, and that's why they're this way. Anyway, so, the last thing that happened today was I finally finished the contradiction cases for my paper, which was a huge chunk of work. At the moment, the paper was sitting around 24,000 words and 66 pages, so it was quite a bit of progress. And I felt good to be done with that. The next morning, I worked my paper for an hour and a half before watching a bit of anime, then going out to meet Michael for our pre-arranged meetup. Originally, we were going to go to thrift shops and dress up in costumes, effectively, and then wear those outfits in public, which we did, back on the trip. And we'd play arcade games and stuff. But Michael's dad did not approve of the idea, so we went on just doing arcade games. But still, we had a good time. I showed Michael his first escape room, which I think he really enjoyed, and I also think he did really well in it too. Like, he's actually really good at solving the puzzles. Then after that, we got some smoothies and played a ton of arcade games, which, man, were far more pricey than I remember arcade games being. Like, I remember you could put a quarter in and play arcade games. These were like $2 each, and you're like, oh, I see. But even with the price, I think it was worth it. Mostly just because it was novel. Like, I haven't played an arcade game in 6 years, something like that. It was ages. Michael uses Hall of Tickets to cash in on a bunch of candy, and I got these flourishing rocks, which I have no use for and will never see flourish, so, took home some quality arcade prizes right there. When we came back, I had food with the Firsts before Michael and Taylor left for youth group. I then stuck around for like 30 minutes or so more to play Table Tennis with Rishi, which was kind of cool. And then after that, I headed back home and binged anime until 11:30 before bed. The next morning, I woke up and straight worked on my paper until like 4 in the afternoon, with a break for breakfast. And then I drove to Jordan's house where we kind of just, got ready for a bit of departure. We grabbed some Burgerfield burgers, which is those aforementioned Burgerfield burger eating. And they had this cool, like, unzipping box design, where it's like they put it in a box, and you unzip the box, but it's all cardboard, and then the burger emerges from the box. It's very interesting. Jordan had to help Julia out a bit, and I did, which is a drug drop while he was doing that on the side of the street. So that was slightly concerning, but very interesting. And then we left. The whole way to Julia's dad's place, which is where we're going, we played worship songs, and we sang those, and that was nice. Then once we got there, we played dominoes, or at least attempted to play dominoes, and that was the worst. Dominoes is, like, I think I looked up how to play it, and I think we played it correctly. And it sucks. Like, who designed that game? Dumb. And, yep, we briefly talked to Julia's not grandma and grandpa, even though I wrote that in here. Uncle and aunt? They're old, okay. Then we got into, like, how quantum and light computing works for the next few hours. And then, like, once 11:30 p.m. hit, we went to bed. Though I didn't actually get to sleep until, like, 1:30 or so. I'm really bad at getting to sleep. It's a very big problem in my life. Still, that meant I got like 5 hours of sleep before waking up at 6:30 the next day. So, it was okay. From there, we drove down to Waihee and got riding on this river path. And it was very cold biking that morning. Like, neither of us thought to wear gloves. And so that really sucked. And after we biked for like 2 hours, we then went through a lot of places I remember biking through on my journey. And so it was super cool and nostalgic. I have a picture of this ruin of something. I don't really know what it is, but I know I saw it on the journey all those years back. And you know what? I actually might be able to dredge up one of Petra's old photos about it. Let me see if I can find that. Also, look, if you see the pictures, there's me. Woo! I just realized that Petra was on the second journey and not the first. Thus, the ruins from the first journey she doesn't have pictures of, so that's a bit of a rip. But I have pictures of the ruins I saw. And then here's a picture of the kilometer-long tunnel we went through that day. Also back in the day when we did the journey too. However, while I would normally move on at this point, I actually got like a nostalgia hit from viewing all those old journey photos. So, basically, this is like kind of a meta point. Because in the email, like, I go through all the pictures, right? But given the fact that you can't see pictures because that's how sound works, big surprise, then I'm just going to skip this part because it would have no purpose without pictures. Like, you couldn't get anything from it. So, just go to the end of it. And there you have it, the journey in a nutshell. Boom, concluded remark where you gotten out of the actual view of it. Anyway, I'm honestly surprised how much I remember from that time, because I was like 16 and 17. Like, I remember quite a bit, and surprisingly, when I see the things I remember, it's like exactly the same as I remember it, even though it's like 5 years ago. And I kind of expect my memories to be like systematically wrong, because, in the past they were systematically wrong. Everything was smaller or larger or more dramatic or whatever else. But it instead seems that, like, when you're 16 or 17, your mind really has developed to the, like, stage where it's pretty static. Because a lot of things I saw just were the same. And I guess that means I've reached my final stages of development. And it's all maintenance from here. So yeah, kind of crazy to think about if I'm being honest. Anyway, everything was like I remembered it. And it was really cool to see it all again. Unfortunately, the tunnels we hiked through way back then, called the Window Walk, were closed. So we didn't get to go through those again, which is very sad. The other big bummer happened as we began to bike back. Because apparently, when you go slightly downhill the whole way, going slightly back uphill the other way, or the return trip, is a very big difference. Thus, Jordan, who wasn't really in good biking condition, couldn't keep up with the biking against the uphill grain. Thus, we both had to, like, Thus, because we both had to get back to Hamilton by 1:30 for different reasons, Jordan and I decided it would be best if we split up, and I booked it back and came back to him with the car. So that's what we did, and I seriously pushed myself on that ride back. Like I had to get back for Stefan's birthday party, so I was like, must go fast, and I did succeed, but I was very very tired by the time I made it back. But I was still glad to see I had that fighting spirit in me, like I still have the willpower, the raw running strength of will. Anyway, thus, after finagling with the bike rack and a few other things, I started driving down to pick up Jordan. But halfway there, I realized his gas light was on, and that he was like almost out of gas. Hence, thinking he had been siphoned, because it's a pretty common phenomenon in New Zealand, I pulled a Yui and I made it back to town in order to put some gas in his tank. However, he had not been siphoned. He was just like, I'm fine. I can, I have like 15 kilometers left in the tank, which I think is kind of like sketch, but apparently he thought it was cool. However, all that took time. Oh, I also forgot to mention that Jordan's phone was dead, so I couldn't contact him. So he was just like waiting for me the whole time. And so, like, me, assuming he was still at the waiting place we designated, was driving back down the canyon, and then I just happened to spot him, like, biking up the other side of the canyon. So that was, like, really fortunate. But eventually I got turned around, and I was able to pick him up, and everything worked out. But still, like, could have been bad. Then, after I reunited with Jordan, and with both of our legs being dead, we grabbed some fish and chips at Jordan's old stopping grounds, and he had to eat a meat pie, which wasn't as, like, bad as I remember it being, but it wasn't great. Then after all that transpired, we drove back to his house and listened to music all the way, and then we made it there with like a few minutes to spare, and I was able to go to Stefan's birthday party on time. As for that event, it was a ton of socializing. Like, not that I minded that, right? Because again, I think I have gained proficiency in this skill. But there was one guy there, Christopher, who I really felt like I clicked with, and we had a really fun dynamic. Plus, later on, I got to talk about like metaphysics, so that was also good. Then at the end, we played Secret Hitler, which is basically like Mafia, but with less killing, and that was alright. Like, one guy kind of controlled the whole game, and I don't know, it definitely felt beholden to chance, so I didn't like it as much, but still it wasn't bad. By the time that was over, I felt pretty tired, so after Stefan says to me, was probably the most complex backing out job I've ever performed, because the cars were like, I was the first car in, and so I had to do like a lot of really weird finagling to try and back out of that place. I then drove home and slept. The next morning, I took the liberty to sleep in. I ate some food while watching some anime, and then I just continued watching anime throughout the day with a 2-hour break to work on this Life of Demo. I also spent an hour experimenting with cooking while listening to What God Is Not. However, there was one event that occurred that day that will scar me for life, and because of its immense significance, I detailed it in the Life of Day email intro form. Thus, for those of you who made this far, you may now enjoy a second intro. The Tale of the Dastardly Light Bulb. Man, this is so much talking. It's always this way, but yeah. Okay, here we go. I flick on the light switch as I step into the door. The two lights in the room come alive, but then with a second. Oh, but this, I see. The two lights in the room come alive, but the second, with a little pop of a last breath, flickers out. I shrug my shoulders, close the door, and then start putting my groceries away. Looks like the light bulb's dead, I think to myself as I open the fridge. I'll fix that tomorrow. Tomorrow comes, and I walk through the same door, 2 new bulbs in hand. That was pretty cheap, I think, as I pull up a chair and go to unscrew the light bulb. Easy enough, I mutter to myself. The light bulb doesn't budge. I scowl and crane my head, as if peering at the light bulb so that I might scold it for not turning when it's supposed to. Must be stuck, I think. My hand grasps the bulb tighter, and I try to give it a more robust turn. Still nothing. Man, it's really stuck in there, I think, craning my head once again, the furrow on my brow deepening. I set my jaw and latch on the bulb with 2 hands. Nothing a little more force can't fix, I resolve, and give it another twist. This time the bulb spins. My expression relaxes as I finish unscrewing the bulb. A little bit of elbow grease works every time, I think to myself as the bulb comes loose. I stare blankly at what resides in my hand. Where is the part that actually screws in? I ask myself as I examine the glass bulb. There are trace amounts of glue where the metal threading should be. I look back at the socket, and sure enough, the metal piece is still right where I left it. I glance back at the glass bulb in my hand with a look of betrayal, and then I toss the thing in the trash can nearby. With a frustrated puff, I climb onto my chair and walk briskly out the door. Oh, I climb off my chair and walk briskly out the door. It clatters closed behind me. A minute or so later, the door is thrust open, and a tool of conquest is in my hand. Pliers. I once more mount my chair and begin my assault on the broken light bulb. I clasp a hold of it and twist. It doesn't budge. I blink twice, check my right hand rule to make sure I'm turning it the right way, and then assail it again. Once again, it doesn't budge. What? I mutter aloud, confusion thick on my breath. I unscrew the little shade that guards the light fixture and peer at the two little knobs that are keeping the corpse of the light bulb in its place. It seems fine, I think to myself as I tried, grabbing the light bulb or the metal bit once more. And this time I twist the metal so hard it crumbles. Still nothing. What the? I change up my angle and fix the pliers to the pin itself this time, and yank. The bulb's husk remains fixed. Why isn't this working? I growl to myself as I give it another go. This goes on for about 15 minutes or so, punctuated by long vexed silences where I carefully examine the mechanism, keeping the light bulb in place. I furiously utilize my AI research apps in a desperate attempt to figure out why the bulb might not unscrew. The AI research app says, sometimes the bulb fuses to, the socket. And so after trying to do it for, I don't know, ages, I need to not add all this. Okay, going back. Until finally, after turning the metal part of the bulb into a crumpled amalgamation of aluminum and suffering, I collapsed like a rag doll to my seat. There was nothing more to be done. Somehow the bulb's base must have fused into the socket, or something along those lines, because it was so stuck in there that no amount of force, save the sort that would break the socket itself, could wrench it free. I had tried my best, but some problems can't be fixed. Flash forward 6 hours as I'm sitting on my bed, working on the rest of the massive McGrew paper. My phone screen lights up, and I look down at the message from Max. I flick open the phone and look at her response. The text reads, "They're bayonet fittings, and so, to get them out, you have to push them in and then turn a quarter turn. They should pop out." I roll my eyes a little. Like I didn't try that, I mutter to myself. I stretch and get out of bed. So I should probably give one more shot so I can tell her I tried. I lazily climb up on the chair and give my good old friends the pliers, and grab the metal. I push the piece up, twist it a quarter turn to the left, and it slides out. I stare at the freed threading for the bulb for a few moments, dumbfounded. I look to the bulb, then up to the socket, then back at the bulb. Huh, I whispered to myself. I slowly sit down from the chair and drop the bent and battered aluminum into my palm. I look at it for a few more seconds. I think it's now clear to me that I am in fact an idiot. I realize as I nod sagely, and I toss the piece of matter into the trash. That's right, I couldn't figure out how to unscrew a light bulb. I think I'm so thoroughly convinced of my great intelligence that I managed to forget how often I am a genuine idiot. I spent around half an hour trying to figure out how to unscrew a light bulb. And not only that, but even after half an hour, I still couldn't figure out how to do it. I gave up because it was too hard. During that time, I utilized pliers, a nail. I researched how to unscrew a light bulb. I looked at the locking mechanism, and still gave up, thinking the light bulb must have been fused to its socket. No, the light bulb wasn't fused at all. Rather, there are two little notches that require you to push them up and then turn them. Push, then turn. An equation that defeated my oh-so-great mind. And it's not like, I didn't see those notches. It's not like I didn't understand how they worked. I at least cognitively was yeah, you have to push these up and turn them. But somehow, even knowing how the notches worked, I failed to be able to unscrew the light bulb. I literally could not figure out how to unscrew a light bulb. How many Alexes does it take to unscrew a light bulb? Wrong! Apparently Alexes cannot unscrew light bulbs. So, you cannot know how utterly embarrassing it is not be able to figure out how to unscrew a light bulb. That is the literal height of stupidity. I can't think of a task more widely regarded as the epitome of simplicity. That's why there are so many jokes about unscrewing light bulbs. It's not like I haven't even done this before. I have unscrewed and rescrewed light bulbs before. Yet for some reason, I could not figure out, for the life of me, how to unscrew a light bulb. And that will forever scar my consciousness. Every achievement of excellence, every accolade of mental prowess, every compliment I ever received from now on shall be forever tarnished and haunted by the memory of that blasted light bulb. Congratulations, Alex! You won the Nobel Prize! I smile joyfully as I accept the trophy of my great accomplishments, but deep within me, a small voice whispers menacingly, "But you couldn't unscrew a light bulb." I can't believe that actually happened. I feel so dumb. I feel like this is just God deliberately trying to humble me. He's up there Alex has gotten kind of cocky doing all this philosophy, getting all those good grades. Let's see how he handles this. Cut to me furiously trying to unscrew a light bulb. Alright, okay, Alright, for realsies, I think I've got it mostly out of my system. It's okay. There are tough realities in life. We've all got to come to accept those. The Holocaust was real, nuclear bombs could cause the world to end at any moment, and some of us are too dumb to unscrew a light bulb. That's just how it is. There's no use dwelling on it. You see me casually screwing and unscrewing light bulbs, almost as if practicing my light bulb unscrewing skills. We all just have to live with certain realities and learn to let some things go, Subtly screws and unscrews a 1/48 scale miniature light bulb resting in the palm of his hand. That's just how life is. So yeah, I think I've learned an important lesson about myself. In cases where I know how to do something really well, like the back of my hand really well, I become extremely narrow-minded, essentially because I'm so convinced that I know what I'm doing. So when it doesn't work, like all it says to me is, "You're not trying hard enough." It doesn't even cross my mind that like I might, in fact, be wrong about the task and the approach I'm taking, and so I should investigate an alternative approach. So yeah, I'm glad I learned this about myself. I think it could be quite relevant for the future, but it was still a very painful lesson. Anyway, moving on from light bulbs. The next day I spent the first 2 hours wallowing in self-disappointment because, not gonna lie, not being able to unscrew a light bulb definitely was a bit of a crushing experience. I then decided I need to do something to break me out of my funk, so I drove to Arapuni, the rural place where Kristen-sized cottages and the general area where I lived once, and I decided to walk my old running trails. I have a picture of the old Arapuni swing bridge from my youth, which you can't see because audio is like that. And then I walked along my old running trails, and man, I realized I was so fit back in the day. Like, I used to run those trails with all their inclines and switchbacks, and I ran them pretty fast, if I remember right. Like, I was a fitness god back then. And it's cool, to go over those trails and be like, woo, look how good I was then. But, like, me now, not at that level. But seriously, such a beautiful place to run, though. Like, man. I have pictures, and if you could see them, you would probably recognize why I think it's so great. But, like, I had a good time. Like, I had a good life. So yeah, absolutely fantastic trails. I think I walked like 20 kilometers or so, walking all the little trails. And I just thought about things the whole time, so that was really good. Once I got back, I cooked beef and orange juice, and then in teriyaki, and then in chicken broth, respectively. And then I taste tested them with my connoisseur's palate. And I deemed teriyaki chicken the best, probably. Teriyaki beef, sorry. And then I worked on this live demo, and I managed to get some of the new light bulbs in, thanks to Mag's text. And I went over the first for dinner. Once I got back, I did more live demo work, and then I watched anime until I went to bed. I then worked on my massive paper all morning upon waking, and then I watched a bit of anime before going over to Cape Marie and strolling across my old stomping grounds. And man, that was a blast from the past. Like, Cape Marie has changed a bit, but honestly, quite a bit of it's the same. Like, I have some pics, and yeah, there's like the old trees we used to play York Cup, and those are great. And like everything's been cleaned up a lot too. Oh, and there's also the resource room where my table tennis skills began. Man, so many good games where I had in that room. And yeah, while I was meandering around, I met up with Werner and Joel's mom, so Mrs. Bartram. And it was a pretty surface level chat we had, but good nonetheless. I think I was there for like an hour in total. Cape Marie is honestly pretty small, so I've seen the whole campus long before that, but nostalgia is not so easily satiated. After that, I drove into Cambridge and got some macas before going home and watching more anime, and then doing more work on my massive paper. And it was at this point that I finally finished all the content, meaning aside from editing, I actually finished. And you have no idea how good that felt. Like, man, that was such a big project. The paper ended up being approximately 32,000 words and 80 pages long. Like, an absolute behemoth in length and quality. So, like, perhaps my finest work. I'm pretty proud of myself. After that, I watched some anime in Triumph, and then I slept, because I was tired. The next day consists of largely editing the previously mentioned massive paper. And then when I write when you write at my level, which is not a compliment, that means there's a lot of editing that needs to be done. Still, I think I cleaned it up pretty well. Around 5 or so in the afternoon, I then met up with Bo and the Firth boys, and we embarked on a journey to Kerosene Creek for some hot spring experiences. And honestly, that was really cool. Like, the moon was shining, and there was, like, all this mist in the waterfall, and, like, mist from the heat. And, like, when the moon went through it, it looked epic. Like, so cool. Honestly, well, the water was about the same temperature as when William and I went, so kind of tepid. But we still had a good time, and I really enjoyed it. Once I got back, I watched, like, one episode of anime, and then I crashed. The next day, I spent like 6 hours straight just finishing up the editing process, and then I for realsies finished the paper, which was a very beautiful moment. Like, absolute conquest and war cries, like, glorious. I'm, like, glad I was filled with such an overwhelming triumph, because I then proceeded to have a very hard conversation with Jordan. Because, see, Jordan and I had had a lot of conversations prior, but I hadn't been blunt and upfront to put my thought about the relationship he was in, as well as how hard it would be for me to make it to his wedding. And see, he wanted me to be his best man, and I didn't really feel like I could turn him down, because, like, when you get offered the best man, he's like, oh, well, I can't just be like, no. So it wasn't until that point that I worked with Augusta to be like, hey, so we need to talk. And yeah, that was rough, but honestly, Jordan handled it really well. And I'm really glad that we had a conversation, because honestly, like, what good is a friendship if you can't be honest with one another? And I know that, like, after that, I definitely respect him more, and value our relationship far more significantly, too. But yeah, definitely rough. However, afterward, since we didn't want to leave it there, we decided to go play some Halo, which was unfortunate because Jordan's controllers didn't work, so we didn't actually get to play Halo. So instead, we decided to go out and do an escape room, which was really good escape room, by the way. Like, probably the highest quality escape room I've ever been in as far as realism goes. It was a murder mystery, and, it was a little bit too realistic, to be honest. There were, a lot of red herrings, which I'd never done an escape room before, And it also made for a very different experience because you didn't know which parts of the puzzle were relevant. So you had to figure out not only the parts, but also how to use them and which ones were actually like gonna do something. So it totally like stuffed us both up at the start. But then we kind of got the hang of it and got on a roll. And then we actually plowed through the room. Like it was very impressive how once it clicked, like we were very good. From there, we then went and played some arcade games, but we only got to do a few since the arcade closed. Thereafter, we rode on electric scooters for like an hour and a half at night, and that was a great time. Like I really enjoyed that, especially because we got to go to like all my old running trails, and that made all the better. Because I was like, ooh, I remember dying on this hill. Oh, I remember dying on that hill. It was very fun, very good time. Although the one downside was both of our hands got really cold because it's winter in New Zealand when I was over there, right? And we didn't have gloves again, so when we had to use the throttle, like I had our thumbs exposed and hands exposed, it just made them very frozen from wind chill. But regardless, I had a great time, and it was probably my favorite New Zealand experience. I mean, aside from the Telltale Escape William, that takes first place, obviously. Once I got home, though, it was quite late, so I just crashed. The next day, I did a bunch of cleaning since my time at Glenn and Mags' house was coming to an end. I then made some food while listening to What God Is Not. Also, all the times I was cooking, I listened to What God Is Not. So this is a podcast from, well, they're technically Roman Catholic, but they're Byzantine effectively in every other way because they're just basically Byzantines. They're like, yeah, we're cool with the Pope. Like, that's what they are. And they just talk about a bunch of stuff. Not like educational per se, but interesting. Because the thing is, like, okay, this is a tangent that's not in the live video, but like the Byzantine mode, they're not like all about thinking. They're about lived experience, kind of, because they're all about like mystery and so forth. So if you really want to understand the Byzantines, you have to hear about the lived experience in a liturgy. Like you don't want to hear about their theology as much because their theology doesn't actually encapsulate what the Byzantine self-identifies as. If that makes some sense. So God Is Not is kind of the perfect way to learn about the Byzantines because it's like here's our lived experience and like how our faith actually works, and that's kind of like what the Byzantines are about anyway. Anyway, I listened to What God Is Not. From there, I went over to Joel's house, and I had some pretty good conversations. We talked about quite a few things, and Joel has some really interesting thoughts on earning people's respect, so I'll keep those in mind for quite some time. We also both took the 16 personality MBTI test, which was the first time I've taken that in like 5 years, because, it's dead. And crazily enough, I got the same type as the one I got way back in the day, an ENTJ. So, a lot of the individual like percentiles were much more moderate than they were in the past, but like the fact that I got the same type was pretty surprising to me. Like, I did not expect that. And I also intentionally answered contrary to, ENTJ standards. Like, I was like, I know what the ENTJ would say here, but I'm going to say what I would say now. Alex 2.0, And I just didn't expect that I would still be an ENTJ. From there, I went over to Jordan's house for his birthday party, and that was tolerable. Julie and I just don't mesh super well, so that made it a bit rough. But I will say she does know how to make a spread. Like, man, so much good food. Plus, Jordan bought 2 giant pizzas, so that was fantastic. The night consisted of a lot of small talk, and just the 5 of us in total talking. And I did enjoy, the other guy that came, so that was at least nice. And yeah, not like the best birthday party I've been to, by any metric, but it was chill. And, I was well fed, so that was enjoyable enough. The next morning, I spent largely over at Glenn and Mag's house. Philip works at a donut shop, so I got to eat a passion fruit flavored donut, which he brought back, and that was an experience. Not like a bad one, mind you, but like definitely strange. I also helped Philip with some math, as he was struggling with it. And it just so happened to be the same algebra concepts I worked with Grace on in the last semester, so fortunately that meant I didn't, have any hard time teaching it, because I had a lot of experience teaching that to Grace. And I will say Philip got so much faster than Grace. Like, that was very nice. No dig at you, Grace. I mean, it is a dig at Grace, but I think Grace is closer to average. Philip's more like exceptional. So it's like a dig at Grace, but only by comparison. By comparison! From there, I followed the Johnson family to Hamilton Lake, where we got to have a good meal and some ice cream before going to do an escape room together. And that experience was so-so. Like, I definitely don't love escape rooms. I definitely do love escape rooms. But the one we did, I didn't really get in the groove for, and I didn't really feel like I was a really big player in it, so it made it less enjoyable because I thought I was more like a spectator than a solver. And with that, I parted ways with the Johnsons, and left for Auckland. The drive there was nice, very relaxing. Once I got there, I went straight to pick up my computer from the repairman I had working on it to try and fix it. But he actually didn't finish it in time, so that was rough. And I did end up paying him for his time, 250 New Zealand dollars, even though he didn't actually ask for it. So, yeah, it was hard because I dropped $250 on nothing, effectively. But I understand where he's coming from. Like, sometimes you just can't get the job done. And that doesn't mean you didn't, deserve a fair wage or work hard. It just means that external circumstances, in this case shipping, prevented you from actually completing your job. But yeah, Dennis is a very interesting man, and as such, I think he deserves a paragraph or 7. So, first off, the place where Dennis was to be found was an old and hobbled storefront. If the sign had ever to be replaced, it was decades ago that it had been, and the same could be said of the shop when the shop had last been cleaned. It was as if Smog had decided to hoard computers instead of gold, and Dennis was his real estate agent preparing his next nest. There was hardly a place to sit, so much less a place to stand. No, there's hardly a place to stand, so much less a place to sit in the establishment. And while at first I found the environment repulsive, that impression, that it gave me slowly morphed into something more like a more euphemistic take. And by the time I left, I found it to be more quirky. The more I got to know Dennis, the more I became convinced that this man was incapable of being repulsive. And thus, I had no choice but to alter my perception of the place in which he lived. Now, as for Dennis, there was nothing endearing about his old and tattered body. Like, his eyes were turning white, one could see the blindness was setting in, his right arm hung limp at his side, and his smile seemed to think that teeth were an accessory. Yet nevertheless, from that smile leaked a soul that defied time, and was determined to be as young as it wished to be. And inside, he wasn't even close to dead. Like the husk he was wearing couldn't fool me for a second. Dennis welcomed me enthusiastically, and proceeded to regale me with tale after tale of computers and their happenings ever since the very beginning. He was in university when computers first came out, and he remembers, before, the CEO of Microsoft was a big deal, walking down that university for a lecture that was being given, and then, afterwards shaking Microsoft's founder's hand, and giving, a lighthearted conversation between the two of them, just like about small talk stuff. That's how long he's been at this. He saw the internet's birth, and grew alongside it, all the way till now, where he utilizes AI in his day-to-day life. And as I got to hear Dennis speak, it was as if the entirety of technological history had swirled and stewed and then settled in his bones. Like, the past itself had been tattooed upon his skin. Even, that which everyone else had forgotten, he remembered. And it genuinely felt as if I met a sage, like a solitary man who had come to know the secrets of the world that others just couldn't know, and yet nevertheless understood the times in which he lived. Like, he hadn't become a relic, like a man stuck in the past, but instead he lived in the present in such a way that the past had no choice but to come along with it. And honestly, Dennis is probably the first person, at which I think that age equated to wisdom. Like, this man understood computers from the ground up, in a way I'm not sure anyone who had not lived through it even could. And after just, an hour of conversation, I think I've decided Dennis is a venerable, computer demigod. Like, honestly, it's pretty sad he's so old, because I'm not sure he'll be around when I come back, but I would really like to sit at his feet and learn from him. Very interesting guy. So yeah, there you go. Dennis the random computer repairman. And clearly he made quite the impression on me. I think he's the first sage I've ever met. Where I'm like, wow, you were just wise. Can you teach me, please? Anyway, after picking up my still broken computer from Dennis, because the part never came, because New Zealand shipping sucks, I then went over to William's house and hung out with him and his flatmates until about 1:30 in the morning. I played a game of chess with QQ and got crushed because he'd been leveling up. When we played back in the day, we were about even, but now he's 100 points higher than me. What the heck, QQ? Power up mode. I then played some Mario Kart and got crushed, and then we watched Silent Voice, and it was beautiful. And Contrary Pigeons got crushed. And honestly, that movie is so well done. The one dude who disagreed clearly had no taste for class. After the movie finished, we went on, to talk about it, and it just beautiful. Such a good movie. So many levels of symbolism and, value, and, very, very good. I then fought against William, QQ, and Peter in an anime quiz, and I would have won by a landslide, but it just so happened we told William that if he got one anime intro right, he would win. And so William, being the competitive man that he is, just yelled, "Attack on Titan!" every single time. And of course, eventually he was right, so technically he won. Emphasis on technically, though, because there is no other conceivable sense in which he won. He lost in our hearts, in our mind, in, every, moral aspect. It was dubious, his actions. From there, William and I decided it would be good to get 2 hours of sleep before I left for the airport. But unfortunately, falling asleep is not one of my skill sets, so it was more like I just closed my eyes for 2 hours. I then drove us to the airport, and for the first time significantly drove on the wrong side of the road, which majorly freaked William out, because he's like, "What are you doing?" But there were no cars coming the other way, so, or cops watching, so my mistake was without consequences. Yay. We then said tired goodbyes, and then I began a long sleepless journey through the world of the airport. From there, I maneuvered my way to the airport through the airport entry processes, and finally found my way on my flight at 6:30 in the morning, which means that I pulled the second all-nighter I've ever pulled in my life. The last time I had caffeine, and this time I did not, so that makes quite the difference, I will say. I then got a little bit of rest sleep on my flight, I would say 3 hours, and from there, I spent the time... Oh, I see. The time until I could check into my hotel trying to stay awake and explore Sydney. And here's what I saw. First off, trains. Trains are glorious and efficient, because I was in Sydney by now. And I totally forgot that, until I was back in Australia, I really like trains. Like I feel like a bit of an idiot though because apparently you can flip the seat around to match the direction of travel. So I ended up sitting backward the whole time, and everyone else was sitting forward, and it was like, oh yeah, I clearly don't know what I'm doing with trains. And then from there, I went to the iconic bridge and opera house, which I saw at a distance, mostly out of like tourist obligation rather than actual interest. And after that, I spent like 2 or so hours exploring the botanical gardens right next to Sydney, like the main city center, and that was really nice. It's a cool park, and the contrast is really cool. Like they have these really like fancy ancient trees. From there, I visited this very old library, which has got to be like the quietest place I've ever been in. Like holy cow, just pulling back my seat and my clothes rustling as I sat down gave an auditory like transgression against the totalitarian silence that governs that library. Like it was very very quiet. And yeah, it was like very classically library. From there, I went on to this cafe in the middle of the gardens and bought these overpriced fish and chips, but they were very good fish and chips, so like it was worth it. So maybe it's not overpriced stuff. Probably the best fish and chips I've ever had. Very good fish and chips. And then thereafter, I went to the classic like park fountain area in the middle of the city, which everyone always goes to. And then I went to this like very very impressive cathedral, probably the most impressive cathedral I've ever seen. It's called St. Mary's Cathedral. Like I have never been in such a reverence-inspiring building before. Like stepping inside a cathedral, it's just like holiness is instilled into your veins. Like when I'm in some place like that, I have this like deep-seated ache to become Catholic because I would very much like for this to be mine, like for this cathedral, and those within it to be something I'm a part of and call my own. But as it stands, I'm just a trespasser, a vagrant wandering through their sacred space, which is just sad because cathedrals are so cool. From there, I wandered around the city some more. I saw a Church of Scientology building next to a normal Baptist building, which I thought was a pretty funny contrast. And then I went on, and when I finally stalled long enough, I went and checked into my hotel, which didn't let you check in until 2 in the afternoon, so that was a big bummer. And see, I decided to book this capsule hotel, which is pretty unique in that you only get these like tiny little pods to sleep in. And that's your whole hotel room. Like if you could see the pictures, you would see what I mean. Oh, that picture didn't work. And it was definitely weird since like all the rooms were mixed gender too. So like below my pod was a girl's pod, and honestly, like I would have probably been like more concerned, but I was just very tired, so I didn't care. I slept so hard that night. I slept like 13 hours. I then awoke at 3 in the morning and just watched the drunk and high people down the streets below for a few minutes. And honestly, that was significantly less entertaining than I thought it would be at first. But I had time to kill, so I ordered the task. I then ventured out into this mentally impaired landscape because apparently it's against natural law that like reasonable, insane people should wander around at 3 in the morning. And after avoiding some annoyed drunks, I managed to order breakfast at Macca's. From there, I meandered over to the train station, hopped on the train, and then I somehow proceeded to miss my stop, so that was great. And I went too far in the other direction. But, of course, I didn't really mind because I had ages before my flight left. And then eventually, I made it to the airport, and everything went smoothly until I actually got on the flight. At that point in time, I found that some lady had plopped herself down in my seat, and when I was perplexed about this, she demanded, / pseudo-asked, that I switch seats with her. And since, I'm an agreeable person, I didn't really have any strong preference, I was like, yeah, alright. And so I sat down in her seat, and she took mine. However, as time wore on, it turned out the flight crew needed the seat she stole from me for some alternate purpose, and she would be reassigned a seat. But at that point, she was suddenly very adamant that the seat she was in was not, in fact, her seat, but it was mine. And she pointed me out to the flight attendant and told me that the seat she was in wasn't actually in my seat, and I had taken hers. Of course, no mention that she had actually asked me, / demanded, that we switch seats in the first place. And I'm not going to lie, that kind of bugged me. Because, I get wanting to sit in some other seat. Maybe, you don't like the person you're next to, or you, might have, had a bad experience. There could be genuinely mildly acceptable reasons for being pushy about taking someone else's seat. And I kind of get that. But, to then yeet the kind person whose seat you stole under the bus, as if he was the one who transgressed the seat assignment god's law. That's just deplorable. That's unacceptable. Why would you be that way? So yeah, that was a big oof. This is how you treat people who are kind and accommodating? Very sad. I think this lady in this encounter increased my cynicism of the world by 0.5%. So yeah, anyway, the flight attendants eventually assigned me to a new seat, which was actually a window seat, and there was no one in the middle seat. So it was better. Ha! And the dude in the aisle seat was also really nice. So yeah, karma's real. Obviously, the airline gods were watching. And you know what? Someday, old lady, you're going to really need to go to the bathroom, and there will be a 5-person line. That's right. The airline gods never forget. Someday justice will be served. So yeah, I got a good deal in the end, and I'm happy it worked out. The dude I got seated next to was great. We chatted some, and he was certainly probably the most enjoyable person I've ever sat next to on a flight. However, unfortunately, my stroke of good luck was not to last because the plane experienced engine failure as we were about to take off, and basically we had to sit on the tarmac for an hour, or maybe a little more, while the mechanics got it fixed. And so we did depart, like an hour or so late. But the problem was that when we did depart, we were late enough that I couldn't make it to my flight, my connecting flight from Los Angeles. Thus, I had to have a 7 hour layover because I couldn't make that flight. So that was a bit sad. And I must say, like, there's a tangible increase in hostility and discontent going from Sydney to Los Angeles. Like, us Americans are actual jerks. Like, we are just, the majority of us are just not kind as a people group. So yeah, I don't think I got any sleep on the plane, which meant that all my time in Los Angeles was functional misery. Like, I was forced to effectively pull a second all-nighter, and that was rough on my body. And remember, like, I have only pulled 3 all-nighters in my life, and 2 of them were in, like, a 3-day span. So yeah, I felt garbage. And I had to dish out, like, ungodly amounts of cash just to feed myself, too, because airport food is expensive. And then I ended up just, getting, like, 3 hours of restless sleep by laying on the ground in the corner. And I'm pretty sure that when God was planning to, like, have his future, like, he was exploring middle knowledge and, his other aspects of his omniscience. And an airport crossed his mind. He was like, no way, I can't allow unjustified evil into this world. But then he realized that without airports, there would be no way for the modern middle class man to truly sympathize with the homeless people of their day. So, after a bit more thought, he was like, I'll allow it, and wrote it into the script. Like, I have so much more empathy for homeless people now. Like, if that's how it feels to be homeless, then that super duper sucks. And it's way worse than I thought how I felt. I then finally got on a plane to Denver, and I got a bit more sleep on that flight. From there, I made it back to my home state and proceeded to see the welcoming sight of my esteemed airport, which is funny how like welcoming an airport can be when you've been out of this country for 6 weeks. And then eventually, Dad picked me up and drove me home. In the car, we caught some. He bought me a bunch of Taco Bell tacos, and it was raining like crazy too when I flew in. A really big thunderstorm. So when I made it home, the first thing I did was join Ben, Caleb, Rebecca, and Grace in wading and eventually swimming through the water at CSU, which was honestly pretty crazy. I've never seen CSU like that. Like I have a picture, but it's not the same. Uh, and like it was so deep. Like I could barely keep my head above the water walking down the sidewalk in the middle of the newly formed pond. So yeah, like I did that, and that definitely woke me up, even though I was very tired. We then ended up being told by a cop to stop, so we obliged. And from there, Grace and I walked home while Ben, Caleb, and Rebecca went to grab the cars. And I got to catch up with Grace some, which was good. Once I finally got back, I took a necessary shower because the water was mega nasty. And then I just conked out because I was super tired. Still, I only got 4 hours of sleep because my sleep schedule was so whacked out. And I wanted to go back to sleep, but I just couldn't. So after like an hour of trying, I was like, well, I guess I might as well just start my day. And then I'll go to sleep when I got tired again. Hence, I got my good old Phoenix and decided to go get gas and groceries. However, as I was driving away to get gas, this dude was very clearly tailing me. Like, very, very close. And I was going slightly over the speed limit, so I was like, well, I'm doing what I can, man. I think I'm like 6 miles an hour over. And then, apparently was not good enough for him. Because what was abnormal is when I pulled off to get gas, he actually followed me and rolled down his window just so he could yell, "You suck!" out the window before continuing on his way. And it's surprising how much that comment by a complete stranger, whose opinion I clearly should not value at all, stuck with me. Like, I mean, obviously, I rationally discounted his words. Like, I was going above the speed limit. I was, just traveling like a normal driving human person. But, like, it nevertheless emotionally impacted me for, like, the next hour. So, yeah, that experience also drilled home to me that Americans are just a lower breed than those of Kiwis. Like, our kindness levels are just 0. Anyway, I purchased what I needed to purchase, and then I went back home. Due to my weariness, I then proceeded to go back to sleep, and I slept another 7 hours or so. And then I woke from that feeling much better. From there, I went and hung out and caught up with Ben, who drove into Mugs, since that's Ben's new favorite coffee shop. And Ben bought me a coffee, and we just talked, and that was pretty great. Then once we got back, Ben gave me this brand new Samsung computer for free, which was a huge blessing, because my old computer still isn't fixed, and this computer, can actually handle my engineering software, so it's a perfect school computer. Plus, it looks good. And it won't be like me lugging my clunky gaming computer around. So yeah, that's nice. So, thank you, Ben. I was then that I drove to... Oh, then I drove my Phoenix somewhere, and then my check engine light started flashing. So once again, my car is in need of repair. And not gonna lie, I've kind of been putting it off, but I think the time has come to actually open up my engine and take a look. Because I've had this problem where it's like, the check engine light will come on, it's like, cylinder misfire, and I'm just like, ignore. And I clear the check engine light code, and then it works for a little while longer, and then it's like, cylinder misfire. And I'm like, ignore. But unfortunately, at this point in time, I can't ignore it anymore. So, yeah. Anyway, I'm just hoping it's like a spark plug or something. I then bought a full new set of spark plugs and inductor coils, so hopefully I can replace those and that goes all well. After then discovering my Phoenix hates me, I then took my mom and dad's car to take my still dead computer to the computer repair guys, and they're going to charge me like $330 for it. So it's going to cost a ton overall. But it's still, cheaper than getting a new laptop. After that, we had dinner. I told a few tales, and then I worked on setting up this new computer right here before going to play Magic with John until like 2 in the morning, and that was great. I really do enjoy playing Magic with John. Like he's a good person to play with. Plus, right now a lot of things are panning out for his life, so it was really cool to hear those stories and just get pumped for him. That night, I tried for, I kid you not, 3.5 hours to fall asleep, and I literally just couldn't. Like, being jet lagged sucks. So I decided I would just, work on stuff from 5:30 in the morning to 8 in the morning. And by then I was finally tired, so I went to sleep. And of course, my body only allowed me 3.5 hours. I don't understand what my physiology is thinking. So the rest of the day, I was still sleep deprived. So that sucked. But I got to reconnect with Joe, so that was a very good day. We got to play a lot of Magic, have some meta conversations, and that was really fun. And that was the whole day. We hung out for ages, like 10 hours or something like that. The next day I woke up, did a few things that needed to be done, and then Benj came over, and we caught up before playing some Magic for a few hours. He has built some nasty decks since I last saw him, like big scary. After that, we then came back to the house and watched some episodes of Blue Lock, which I maintained is fire. And then Benj left because, we had a climbing engagement. From there, I went to have some more food. To have food before going over to Neo's place, which is also known as Alan's place because Neo now lives in Alan's house. And it was majorly cluttered, but honestly, I think the engagement worked out well because Neo and Alan are good friends and they kind of need each other to motivate each other. We talked about what I'd missed over the last few weeks, which honestly wasn't a whole lot. And then Neo and I played Magic until 2. We both had the same deck too, which is basically the same thing. And so, yeah, that game took ages. Neo's deck did a little bit better, but I think it took 2.5, 2 hours. It was ages. And then my sleep tone was still really whack, so I was 2 in the morning, but I wasn't tired. And then he was like, I kind of need to go to bed, and I was like, understood. So yeah, aforementioned sleep schedule wackiness meant I didn't even feel tired until 3:30 that morning, and yep, that kind of stuff. But I did able to get to sleep. I was able to sleep, and I woke up at 11 the next day. I then did some small things, began working on the Magic suitcase. I made the center diamond, which worked out well, but also took way more sheet metal than I anticipated. So I'll probably have to go and buy another thing of sheet metal. I then did some VR before joining my family in the car to leave for the Wade's cabin, where we did our biannual hangout with the Macy's. The drive up was nice. Grace and I sat together in the car, and then once we got there, it was also relaxing, but radically uneventful. We just did a bunch of small talk until bed, and of course, I tried to go to sleep at a reasonable hour, but combining, the residual jet lag and the fact that I had, mice climbing on the walls, which houses smell like mouse turds too, made it really hard to actually get to sleep. Hence, since I learned my lesson that one night where I laid in bed trying to sleep for hours, I decided to get up and work on this live demo instead of just trying to fall asleep. And it was during that time that I did the whole journey recap, which I grant wasn't immediately relevant, but it was nostalgic. And so, it's also an important part of my past, so it was worth including. Then finally, once I was done, I got to sleep at 4:30 that night. I only got 4 hours of sleep because that's how it woke me up the next day. And I was tired, but c'est la vie. We then didn't do all that much the next day, but I did get to play some very low power Spikeball, which didn't really count as playing Spikeball, mind you. And then there was, that was kind of fun. We then went throughout the various downtimes, I worked on this live demo. And then, about the afternoon, Ben came up and stuck with us from 4 to 10 at night. And we were doing a bunch of songs around the campfire, because Grace and Amelia are musically talented. And then Ben showed us how you could put isopropyl alcohol on your hands and hold fire. Hence, the Weeb and me got this picture where I'm holding fire, which you have to see because it's very cool. That's real fire, folks. Now you see the true power of the philosopher. He can hold fire with his bare hands. And honestly, I felt so cool. So yeah, that was a blast. From there, Amelia and her dad told ghost stories, and I brought my creepy music into play, which honestly made them so much more scary. Having creepy music at your disposal can come in quite handy. And then from there, Amelia and I had a deep conversation, as is the Macy family tradition. And then Eliana and Grace came in and crashed the conversation because they wanted to listen in. And I mean, fair enough, but there are also, certain conversations that will not be shared. You have to be in a certain mental place to have certain conversations with certain personages. So yeah, deep conversations are not really just listen in, it's cool. And then from there, Amelia and I just were well, rip, and just the conversation devolved. That night I slept in because I didn't have mice, which was nice because I slept inside the main house. But I still felt pretty tired from waking up. The next morning, I lethargically had breakfast, work on this life theme with some, and then I said goodbyes, and we parted ways. On the drive home, Grace started asking a lot of big questions, but I was tired, so I didn't really have it in me to give her the full fleshed out responses, which apparently, according to her, made my responses way more simple, which was good. So she was like, I like it when you're tired and you answer my questions because I can actually understand you. And I was like, but no, I don't want to talk. Anyway, once I made it home, I worked on my suitcase some more while listening to podcasts, and surprisingly, it's been a fair amount of work to put this thing together. it's a bit of a task. I then watched 2 episodes of Blue Lock with my parents, and that was fantastic. The scene where Chigiri breaks free of his chains, like, oh my gosh, pure beauty. I mandatorily went on a run that night because of that. I did more work on this live email before settling down to watch a few hours of anime. And it's not like, I, you know, set out to watch a few hours of anime. It's just, I started My Star and totally got sucked in. So, yeah. Yesterday I woke up at 8 to get my eye exam, and that went okay. See, I've been seeing a bunch of little floaters and strings in my vision recently, and they've been growing in number ever since the last 2 months. And it's really starting to get annoying. However, since I was in New Zealand for most of that time, like, there wasn't anything I could do about it. So it turns out, like, there still isn't anything I can do about it. I thought this might be the case, but I wasn't sure. So it turns out I have an early onset of eye floatinator disease. Essentially, this happens to a lot of people when they're like 40, but it's happening to me when I'm like 22. So that sucks. So it's just annoying. It's not harmful. At least that was good to hear. But still, there's tons of little specks in my vision all the time now, which really sucks. So yeah, looks like I'm just gonna have to get used to it. After learning about that, I went home and worked on my Magic Suitcase some more while listening to podcasts. Then Ben and I went and got Mickey Doba, which was nice, and we had a good conversation while we ate. From there, Joe came and picked me up, and we went over to his new house, and we played in the Oculus. And man, I've gotten rusty, though. I failed one of the easiest Expert Plus fast songs. It was pitiful. Oh, how great I once was! Insert bragging video showing immense babysitter skill. But yeah, eventually, unfortunately, I've fallen from such heights, and perhaps one day I'll return to them. From there, I participated in my first Monday night in ages, which was great. I caught up with the Myers clan, and we all spun on this Beneath Thing of Death. I hurt my wrist some. And we went over to the Myers house and played Magic until 11:30. It was like a 2.5 hour long game with just insanity, because Joe did his group hug deck and I played my wallet deck, which honestly makes such a good combo. And then after that, Sam and I played 9 1v1s in 45 minutes, which was great. We actually play so fast we play 1v1s, and I love it. And yeah, Joe drove me home, and I slept. And with that, we had caught up to the present. Now, as it stands, this email is clocking in at a mere 17,700 words. So, clearly I'm improving. Look at that. It's getting shorter. And, yeah, I made it. And you made it. You made it this far. I salute you. Congratulations. Until next time, don't die.